And it's BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. My guest on the program today is Ciaran Mylene. He runs the page Irish Cold Cases, and he's going to talk to us all about the Irish Vanishing Triangle. Ciaran, are you with us?
How's it going, Ned? Thanks very much for having me on.
You're welcome. Now, the first question that I have for you is, what made you curious about true crime cases?
Well, I suppose it was kind of a personal story in a sense. When I was about 10 years across the street, actually shot his son dead with a shotgun while he was asleep. So I came back from school and my whole street was covered in like cops and reporters and the forensic scientists and the state pathologist. And I remember looking out my window like as a kid, like just fascinated by the whole thing. And then I kind of followed the case in the papers, and I think that would be like the genesis, surely, of my interest in true crime. And then I started watching the show when I was about, I don't know, 13 or 14, called the FBI Files, which like hooked me into American true crime. And it's kind of the gift that keeps giving America when it comes to true crime. Like there's gangland, the Wild West, serial killers, bank robbers. Like I think I've studied all areas in that sense when it comes to true crime. So the Vanishing Triangle to me, go ahead, sorry.
No, I would just say that's really fascinating. Yes, and please continue with the introduction about what is the Irish Vanishing Triangle.
Well, basically in the 1990s, some women started going missing throughout the island of Ireland, mainly in the eastern part. And like Ireland, it's not really a transient country like say Australia or America, like where people can kind of, you know, disappear or move around. So it was quite an unusual circumstances. And then in 1998, the guards eventually set up a thing called Operation Trace to see if any of the cases were linked after an 18-year-old girl, Deirdre Jacob. She vanished just outside her home, just south of Dublin, in a county called Kildare. So and when that started, then the media started, you know, speculating and all them things. And because none of the women had been found, the title was given Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. Because it's just a title, like it's not a reference to geographical profiling or the actual cases. It's just, you know, like say Jack the Ripper and the Golden State Killer and these type of titles, you know, they lure people in, better or worse, but it will draw people's attention to the cases. So it's just a title, really, that's all.
Do you believe that these crimes are connected and they are the work of a single killer, or do you believe that there are multiple participants or multiple people that could be responsible for these crimes?
Well, see, to be honest, like, as you know yourself from studying the Zodiac, like when you're going back in time, I know you're going back a bit further, it's quite difficult. And like, to be honest, like, as I said, I looked into a lot of cases over the years, and this is by far the most complex one because you have, say, between the years of like 1987 to 2003, you have like 12 women that went missing and some of their bodies were found. And like in 5 cases, there was like suspects known to the victim and they were last seen with them. And it was like, you know, the guards were sure there was only one suspect in these cases. But then there's the other 7 cases where there's like very little motive. There's nothing in their lives. They weren't involved in criminality or anything like that. Like they were young and planning for their futures, it seemed, and just vanished off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. Like 30 years later, and still, which is shocking.
And as I understand, you actually do have formal education in criminology, is that correct?
Yeah, because back to when I was saying about like my interest in true crime, I actually ended up studying law with criminal justice, and I had an element of criminology because back when I went to college, there wasn't really much criminology options available. So I did that in college, and then when I completed college, I ended up doing a diploma myself in criminology. So I would have some, suppose, bit of a professional background, so to speak.
Okay, and would you like to give us an introduction to the first crime that gets associated with the Irish Vanishing Triangle?
Yeah, and even now, this is actually, even this would be open for debate because, like, say, in the broadest of timelines, like some people will go back to like 1979 and as recently as 2011. Yeah, So, but to me now, having studied the cases for about 5 years, like now I've always been aware of them living in Ireland. I've decided to like focus. I usually focus on 7 cases where there's like no necessarily a clear motive or a clear suspect. So I actually put together a blog where I mentioned them, where I wrote about 12 cases. And now 5 of the cases with the clear suspects, like as I said, the guards are sure that there's only one suspect. So I usually try to like just to discuss the 7 cases where there's very little to go on, and to even establish if there's any links between them. Like, see, on some of the cases, 2 of the cases, the women's bodies were found, but then in the other 5, there was no bodies found. And so the connections are all just circumstantial threads, like that's all. So if you go through the cases, I suppose we could kind of discuss if you see any links that pop up or anything, but they'd only be nothing that you could bring someone to court for anyway. Unfortunately, so.
Right, 'cause that's what I would like to ask you. Firstly, talking about one of the early victims, who was Antoinette Smith?
Yeah, now Antoinette Smith was she was a 27-year-old mother of 2. She had 2 young kids. She lived in a place in southwest Dublin called Clondalkin. So on a Saturday night in July, she left her kids with her father Carl and went to a David Bowie concert. Sorry, just outside Dublin City. So about 11:30 after the concert finished, she returned to the city, went to a nightclub till about 2:30 in the morning, met 2 other friends there, went onto the main street in Dublin. One of her friends went home. Then about 30 minutes later, her other 2 friends went home, and they seen her walking down a street known as O'Connell Street towards O'Connell Bridge at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was the last confirmed sighting of her. And in April the following year, 1988, a young family were out for a picnic, and they found her body in a bog drain. They'd be known as in Ireland, they'd be like peat bogs or something you might call them in America. Yeah, so I think because of a lot of dry weather, the bog had actually collapsed. Yeah, and the family found her body, and so the state pathologist concluded that she'd most likely been strangled. And yeah, so that would be the first case. And then there was never no arrests made that were known to the public, and like no suspects declared to the public or anything like that. And that's what, now 37 years ago, and the crime's still unsolved to this day.
Okay, though, and are there similarities among the crimes that would suggest at all that this could be a serial killer? Or do you think that these are more like opportunistic abductions? Because you said some very big points. Number one, she goes missing, she was strangled, and her remains have been disposed. And not all killers do that. I mean, you even brought up the Zodiac killer. The Zodiac more or less would shoot the victims or stab the victims and then walk away.
Yeah, because... Yeah, no, good point. And a lot of the times, I think when, like, say, when the killer makes a massive effort to hide the body, it kind of implies that they have something to lose in their family life. Like if you take the Long Island serial killer, for example, Rex, something his name was, like he went to massive extents to hide the body and hide his crimes. And then I think he was a successful architect with a family and stuff like this. So you can kind of decipher the ones that go to a big effort to hide the body would, like, you know, have something to lose in their personal life, like a wife, kids, and a family, and they really wouldn't want it to come out. So when they go to a massive effort to hide the body, you can somewhat get a read on the type of person that might have done it just by that alone.
Ah, yes, talking about the Long Island serial killer or Gilgo Beach killer Rex Heuermann,
Yeah.
who's currently awaiting trial. I mean, I think he did it, but we are still innocent until proven guilty, I suppose.
Yeah.
But now to move on into the timeline, when would be the next case that gets associated with the Irish vanishing triangle?
Yeah, the next case would be 1991. Another young mother, Patricia Doherty. She was 29 years of age. She had 2 kids. She also lived in southwest Dublin in a suburb called Talla. So I think it was the 23rd of December, just before Christmas. Now, Christmas in Ireland it's a massive thing. So I think she spent the day going around Talla where she lived, shopping for Christmas stuff for her kids and so on, and got home at 9 o'clock and went back out at 9:10 straight away to go back to the shops to continue shopping, and basically never seen again. A neighbour seen her making her way towards the shopping mall she wanted to go to, and then somebody came forward that might have seen her getting into a red car outside the shopping centre, but that couldn't be confirmed. And so that was in December of 91. So in June, 21st of June 92, a man was up cutting turf in the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains, and he found Patricia's body in a bog again. And I think that was about a mile from where Antoinette Smith was found. Now, the Dublin Wicklow Mountains is a vast open place, real, like, even though you're only 20, 30 minutes from Dublin City, you're really into the wilderness, like, straight away. So it's a vast open place, but they were found, about a mile from each other, and same cause of death, like asphyxiation. So, yeah, that would be.
But when you say asphyxiation, was she like strangled in the same way? Are we talking about like manual asphyxiation, or were they strangled with cloth or a rope or something?
Yeah, very good question, because usually when asphyxiation just means their air was cut off. It doesn't actually imply what the act was. So in the Antoinette Smith case, the first case we discussed, the state pathologist found 2 plastic bags actually wrapped around her head, like horrendous crime. But unfortunately, the body was so decomposed, he couldn't determine if the bags were placed on her head when she was alive or dead. So in the Patricia Doherty case, he gave the conclusion also asphyxiation, but the basis for these conclusions was there was no sign of trauma or a gunshot wound, because, like, when the body's so decomposed, I suppose that's all you can really determine. So in the Antoinette Smith case, you could probably presume that the bags may have caused her death, but Patricia Doherty, there was no bags or anything like that. So, but it was still like asphyxiation.
Okay, then. And what would be the next crime in this timeline that you've been exploring?
The next one would be in 1993, a 26-year-old American woman, Annie McCarrick. She originally moved to Ireland from Bayport, Long Island in 1987, then relocated fully in 1993 in January. So she lives in Sandymount in South Dublin. And it was a Friday. So she got up and did some shopping around the Sandymount town, and went back to her apartment at about 3 o'clock, was seen leaving her apartment again. And where she went then now is like quite open for debate. It's been like because again, you're going back 30 years. So it's earlier in the day, she'd actually phoned one of her friends to see if she wanted to go hiking in the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains, but her friend had actually had a leg injury or something and couldn't go. So that was earlier. So later that day, when she left her apartment, another woman she worked with seen her getting on a bus heading towards the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains, and there was 3 unconfirmed sightings of her in the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains that night. So a bouncer seen her in a pub at 9:30, and then there was a sighting in a cafe and a post office. But again, unfortunately, they couldn't be confirmed because the people didn't know her. And so,
right, because this is something that I just have to ask about this, and I hope I'm not sounding dismissive, but do you think that those sightings were accurate? Because when I look at other cases for Black Box Online Radio, all the time I just encounter these like type of doubt when I'm like, now wait a second, did this person actually see the victim, or was it just someone with a similar appearance? And when they don't have things like, surveillance footage or things like a photograph, I have a lot of doubts. Do you think those were credible sightings?
See, the thing is, you're not to discredit the witness, but I think Annie regularly went hiking up in this area. So, you could be mixing the days up, or it could be someone similar that looks like her. And then also when Annie's parents came straight over to Ireland and they were going all around campaigning and all, so people would want to help them. So there's also that thing, people want to come forward and they're not necessarily lying, but they really want to share the information. And then the family may be desperate and pick up on the information as being true. So it's just, but they are the last sightings, like reported sightings of Annie regardless. That's it. They're the last confirmed, or any reports of her. And personally now, it's just a personal opinion, I do kind of lean towards that she did go to the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains that day because she phoned her friend and said she wanted to go, and then the person who seen her getting on the bus worked with Annie, so you can take that as a positive sighting, like they knew her. So
okay though, but this brings up another question. What was the cause of death in her case?
No, Annie's never been found. They never found
Okay.
her body.
Okay.
Yeah, she's the first one that was. Yeah, nobody knows what happened to her. So, in 2023, on the 30th anniversary, the Gardaí announced they'd actually upgraded the case to a murder case, and they were focusing maybe on a suspect in the Sandymount area where Annie lived, and that's coming up on a year, and there's been nothing else mentioned of it lately. So, hopefully that case will get solved. But actually, in Ireland, it's probably the most infamous missing person case of all time. Will be Annie McCarrick. Yeah, there'll be a few others, but it'd be so well known because she was from America, and it was just very high profile. So there's loads of theories about it, and loads of things have been written in Ireland, and all these sort of things like IRA theories, mad stuff. Like, yeah.
Is there a specific theory that has resonated with you that stands out to you above the rest? Or is there one that you might go with in this case?
That's a good question. Personally, I don't like. We're free to mention this person. They've been named as a suspect numerous times by the Gardaí. A certain individual called Larry Murphy. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of this person.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So there was the bouncer who thought he seen Annie McCarrick in the Johnny Fox's pub. He provided the Garda with an artist impression of the person he saw, and it could be Larry Murphy when he was about 26, 27, and the description he gave would fit Larry Murphy. So just a personal opinion, but that would be where I would lean for in the Annie McCarrick case, would be Larry Murphy.
Right, you were asking if I've heard of him, and even in my own minimal readings about the Irish Vanishing Triangle, Larry Murphy is going to be a suspect in multiple Irish vanishing crimes.
Rightly
right?
so. Yeah. Because I suppose we'll just do a quick run on him. Basically, in the year 2000, he was caught in a kind of a hunting area in Kildare with a woman in a car, and he was basically caught trying to put a plastic bag over her head and strangle her, and two hunters actually disturbed him in the process. And this is how small of a country Ireland is. Remember I was saying this, it's not transient at all. The two hunters actually knew Larry Murphy. Yeah, they were from the same town as him, and took the woman to, when they were able to calm the woman down, like the poor woman, took her to the police station, told the guards straight away who he was. They arrested him the next day, but he's never spoken anything. He won't say anything. He's like, he got out after I think 15 years, 10 years, which is absolutely shocking. But he was ran out of Ireland as soon as he got out. Like, I think he lives in London now or something under a false name. So he can't ever come to Ireland again because everybody knows who he is. But
right, and as I said, from my own small connections to this case, as I understand, when Larry Murphy went to prison, he was absolutely hated by everybody in the prison. Like, these are a lot of stories about how they hate sex offenders, or they hate people who are targeting innocent women and so on. And have you heard similar things? Is that all true, that he was very well known in the prison and very well hated?
Well, you would be hated in, see, Ireland, they actually divide the prisons where it would be like a general prison population, they'd call it, where it'd just be your standard criminals. Then they'd have a more kind of high secure prison where it'd be like ex-IRA members and killers. And then they'd have a sexual offenders prison where it'd be the likes of Larry Murphy and all. So the people he spent his time in prison with were people similar to him. So by all accounts, Larry Murphy didn't have that too bad of a time in prison, and regularly taking ecstasy, smoking weed, drinking, all these other sickos. And there was actually a cousin of his, David Lawler, that was convicted for killing a woman in North Dublin in 1996, and they had seemed to get on great in prison by all reports.
Well, that is absolutely saddening. That that's just how people are spending time in prison. But
so as we go on, sorry to interrupt, but as we go on, when we get to the Deirdre Jacob case, we'll come back to Larry Murphy in prison. There's more on that, but we'll have to go. It's irrelevant to the Deirdre Jacob case, though. That will be later on.
Right, and I just wanted to say, you briefly mentioned the IRA, and again, I've encountered some things about how the IRA becomes suspects in some of these crimes. And do you think that there's any type of credibility to those theories, or that, ex-IRA members, or that these things are done in some type of terrorist-like fashion? Is there any credibility to those theories?
In my personal opinion, to be frank, no. Because basically the theory behind the IRA killing Annie McCarrick goes like this. Annie McCarrick was in a pub. She met an IRA member. They began talking. He got drunk and he divulged a lot of secrets about the IRA to Annie McCarrick. So when he sobered up later on, he decided to kill her because she knew secrets about the IRA. Then called up some other IRA members and they went out to the Wicklow Mountains and then hit her body properly or whatever. That's as the theory goes. So I would have a few questions about that. One, anybody in the IRA gets in because they don't open their mouth. That's the minimum thing. There's people in Ireland that would have relatives, parents, siblings that are in the IRA and they'd have no idea till they die or it comes out much later in life. Yeah. So that's the first thing, right? They don't get drunk and go to pubs and start giving secrets off. Okay. But let's say he did do that. Okay. So he goes in, talks to her and says something outlandish like, oh, the Irish Prime Minister is a member of the IRA. Right. So say he says that to her. What's she going to do? She's going to go down to the newspapers and go, I was in a pub on Friday night and some drunk guy told me the Irish Prime Minister is in the IRA. Is the newspaper going to run this story? No. Now, if I can decipher that, the IRA can decipher that. So they're not going to take a risk and create the most infamous missing person case in Irish history and bring all that attention onto themselves. It's just not how they operate, like, you know?
I absolutely follow that type of thinking. So then what would be the next case in the timeline?
The next case now would be a lot less known case. And for me, that's something that has actually kind of griped with me over the years will be a woman called Eva Brennan. She went missing from a place called Rathgar in South Dublin, not too far from Annie McCarrick at all. And she was 39 years of age. So one Sunday she went to her parents' house for Sunday lunch. I think she had a small argument over something about food or something insignificant, you know, families, you know yourself. And then, yeah, so she decided to leave and was basically never seen again. A Sunday afternoon, like broad daylight in the middle of July. They think that she went back to her apartment, which would be about a mile from her parents' house, because the jacket she was wearing was hanging on a coat there. And that was the last sighting of her, never to be seen again. So, and she would have walked through like a busy town to get from her parents' house to her apartment, and nobody seen her leave her apartment again or go in or anything like that, just gone. And now in this one though, the police were quite slow to act. I think the family actually had to, the father was quite a successful racehorse owner and he owned a few pubs, so he had a few political connections, but he had to use these to get the guards in. But I think it was too late then to come up with any forensic evidence or anything like that. And still, never, like Annie McCarrick, to this day, she's never been found. And that was 30 years ago this summer as well, yeah.
And do you have any type of theory or hypothesis as to what happened to her?
Eva, absolutely none, and I don't think how anybody could be, because literally, as I explained, you can, you know, if you were to do a write up on it, you could go into a bit more detail about her life and all these things, but that's the case. Like, if I don't know how anybody could have a theory on it, like based on that. Like there was, I think she had a few, like a bit of a problem with depression, you know, or whatever, but just slightly. And I think the family, like, they rightfully told the guards this. They didn't want them to think she was withholding information, but like, and then they suggested suicide. But you'd have a few questions about that. Like, one, there's no suicide note, and two, most importantly, where is Eva? She was never found. So, you know.
Yeah, it's absolutely saddening, and I've encountered that in some of these other missing person cases where it's almost as if the person just simply vanished and there just isn't a lot of evidence to explore. And you can look at the connections in their personal life, but when those don't seem to pan out, what exactly do? You can speculate as much as you want, but following the trail of evidence just becomes more and more difficult. And I'm always hopeful that the authorities have more information than they're sharing to the general public. But it seems like this case has been very, very well documented in the Irish press, and there are several different podcasts that have talked about this. Lots of YouTubers have made videos about this one, and I mean, like, do you mind if I just ask you that though? Like, how much of the case file or of the criminological evidence has been made available to the public?
Yeah, not like just what really journalists and stuff have written. The guards will make the odd statement, but the guards are in Ireland, they're quite a secretive organisation. I don't mean as in corrupt or anything, but they're not an alarmist organisation, so they'll never, like, make drastic announcements, and they don't really like. In America, you can get these FOIs, you call them, freedom of information. Like in Ireland, that's not really a thing. Like, and like in America, say you have the FBI are kind of above the police, and they can compel them. In Ireland, it's the guards are the guards, and that's it. So they can kind of decide what they wanted to release and what's not. And I'm not disagreeing with them. They're the professionals, and they're the ones that can make these calls. But like the thing in America that I would kind of admire is like when the case goes cold for about 20, 30 years, the cops will release all the information, because after that length of time, you might as well, right? It doesn't seem like it's going to do any harm. But in Ireland, that's not going to happen. I'd be shocked.
Right, and it can be so valuable because once the case file can get out on the internet, it goes so far beyond. You're not just taking the word of the journalist, because I don't know exactly what your experience with exploring the Irish Vanishing Triangle has been, but when I've looked at other true crime cases, the journalist gets so many things wrong, and some of them aren't even journalists. They're like people who are writing a story 20 years after it's happened. The dates are wrong, the names are wrong, the locations are wrong, and it's in absolute contradiction to what's in the case file. So
no, you're 100% right. That's why like I started like say writing on this stuff about 5 years ago, and I only really feel now like capable of talking about it properly that I've done so much research, because I said there's loads of like contradictory dates and stuff, and it just, I don't know why, if journalists just go quickly or just Google stuff and throw it in quick, and then but you have to like really get into the books. Like there's books written by detectives and stuff, and there like that's where you kind of get the real, like you'd hope the best information.
Yes, but we've gone through 4 cases now. 2 of them ended up in murder that were committed by asphyxiation, and 2 of them are missing persons cases where the victim was never found. What would be the next case that you've explored?
The next case now would be one of Ireland's other most infamous.
Ciaran, we lost you for a second. Ciaran, are you with me? Ciaran, are you with me?
Yeah, sorry, I think the screen froze there for a second.
Oh, yes, your screen froze for a second, but please continue. You said you were going to share something about one of the most infamous disappearances in Irish history.
That would be a woman called JoJo Dullard. She was a 21-year-old woman. She was from Kilkenny in the Irish Midlands, and for about, I think in 1992 or 93, she moved to Dublin, where she worked as a waitress. And after about 2 years, she decided she wanted to move back to Kilkenny, where she was going to start a more secure job. So she'd already moved back to Kilkenny, actually, but she had to go back up to Dublin on in November, I think it was a Thursday, to collect a payment from a post office. So she went early in the morning. Then her bus home to Kilkenny wasn't until later that night. So she went to a pub and met a few friends, hung out for the day, and she was 21, so she lost track of time, missed her bus home. But for whatever reason, she was determined to get back to Kilkenny. Now it's about 130, 150 kilometers from Dublin, so it'll be a fair trek. So at about 11 o'clock, she got to the bus depot in Dublin, and there was one bus going to a county called Kildare, a town called Naas, which was about 50 kilometers from her hometown. So she got the bus there, and then she hitchhiked. She got hitchhiking. She got a lift from an elderly guy, and ironically, he actually told her, you should be in the town in the Garda station and get the bus home tomorrow, because hitchhiking isn't safe. But he gave her a lift to another town, and from there she got picked up by another person who was never been identified, and they dropped her to a town called Moon. At 11:45, she called her friend from the payphone, and after about 2 minutes, she told her friend she had flagged down a car. So she got into the car and never seen again. Shocking.
And is there any description of this car that took her away, or like did they have any like witness sighting? Do people know what the driver looked like?
there's nothing to do with there's no identification of the driver, but a woman actually came forward to say she'd seen a woman matching JoJo's description getting into the backseat of a red car, either a Ford Serena or a Toyota Carina. She wasn't sure on the model, but she was convinced it was red, and that the woman got into the backseat of the car. So, like, and the town moon would be, I don't know, maybe 150 people live there. So a quarter to 12 at night, there's nobody there. Like, it's completely deserted. So unless the woman's getting the day wrong, you would have to think that was JoJo she's seen. And like, based on that sighting now, a lot of people have speculated there was two people in the car. And obviously that's the most logical. Like, now someone was in the passenger seat, that's why she got into the back seat. So the most logical conclusion would be there's two people, and that's most likely. But one thing I would keep in mind, like, some of these guys, like, they make little plans, say, before they go out. So say they'll put a baby's carrier seat in the front seat, make them look a lot less threatening, you know. So he pulls up, he looks like a father, and the person's more likely to get into a car. So I would just keep it in mind that if it was JoJo getting into the car, there might have been something in the front seat, or she could have been just putting her bag in the back seat and then getting into the front seat. So it's not definite that she got into the back seat, but it would tell a lot if she did, because then there, like, you know, if there could be two people involved in that crime. And now that there was a lot of speculation. There was actually a guy in South Kildare identified as a suspect basically by local people, and they were trying to get his land searched and all this, but I don't think it ever came to fruition. And there was some arrests made, but then that turned out to be like a false lead. Yeah, somebody was basically trying to frame somebody for the crime so they could get out of prison early. Yeah, that turned out to be false. It's terrible on the family, like, terrible. And like, I should mention about JoJo, her two sisters have done such great work. Like, they're the ones that have kept it in the spotlight. And same goes for all the cases. Like, their families are just absolutely relentless. Like, and I've said it before, the families are the type of people you'd want to be investigating crimes. They're just brilliant. Like, I don't know how they do it, like, on such difficult circumstances. So yeah, her sisters managed to keep that case. It's still in the public eye. Yeah, that one's being upgraded to murder as well. So, but still nobody.
Right, and I've just experienced this when looking at other cases, and we said we would come back to Deirdre Jacob later on, but I even heard that one that, like, it was a missing persons case that then gets upgraded to murder, and we don't always see that with American cases. We more or less get, like, statements from the authorities where they believe that that's happened, and it is possible, but I mean, this seems to be happening very frequently with these Irish stories.
Yeah, they have this system in Ireland, they call it, they do a proof of life test. Now, again, I don't know exactly how it works, but they basically do a lot of victimology and some sort of data analysis. They say, as I say, in Ireland, they don't give much away what they do, but that's basically what they'll announce. And then based on that, they'll upgrade it to a murder inquiry, yeah. And that means then they'll get a lot more police investigating the crime, so more resources go to it. But, you know, if you look at JoJo's case and even Annie McCarrick and all, like, there's nothing in their life, anything that would suggest that they're going to go missing, or they intended to run away from their life, you know?
Now, is it possible that these are just unconnected crimes that are committed by opportunistic predators? You know, some guy sees a girl in a vulnerable place, he abducts her because he thinks that nobody's looking, and that there isn't any single serial killer at all. Is that like a strong possibility?
Well, I think I remember there is a great Irish crime journalist, Barry Cummings. He'd be probably the best guy who's ever. He'd be the best source on this. But I remember him saying, so if you take 12 cases, right, that means you're going to have 12 separate men capable of killing a woman, hiding her body, sometimes permanently and sometimes for decades. And all 12 of these men, none of them have ever been caught or reoffended again. That seems very difficult to comprehend. So you'd have to think that some of the cases will be linked just based on that, you know?
In the small geographic section, like,
Yeah.
that's what they call it, the vanishing triangle, right? That I can comprehend. But you mentioned how I do the segment about the Zodiac killer in California with, you know, the population of tens of millions of people. I think mathematically, then you could find 12 people that would be doing that. And there are countless serial killers in California. But not only are we dealing with Ireland, it's a very small part of Ireland, correct?
Yeah, and I think actually now that you mentioned about the multiple things, there was a case in I think it was in Louisiana outside New Orleans where it was actually 3 serial killers active at the same time. I can't remember, it's a city just outside New Orleans, and they thought it was one serial killer, and then it turned out it was actually 3 different ones. So in America sometimes there could be like crossover things like this, but in Ireland, like there's never been a serial killer before or anything like that. So. And I did go back now through like records like from I think about 1950 to like today, looking for any series where there'd be a lot of women missing like this, and nothing. Like obviously there's some missing person cases scattered throughout the country, but never in a condensed area over such a small period of time.
Out of curiosity, do you remember exactly with the New Orleans story? Are these older cases, or are they from the early 1900s, or are they more contemporary cases? Or
No, it would be more recent. I think it would have been around 2000. It's some place called the Bayou or something. Would that be a place
the
outside?
Bayou Strangler, that would be one
Yeah,
of them.
yeah. If you
There's
look to
also,
get into that again,
I think
there was
Clay the
three
serial
guys.
killer is also connected to that one, where yeah, there's like yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's a very large portion of homicides, and at first it looks like one killer, but it's multiple
Yeah.
killers, and some have been attributed to serial killers, and others have not. Yeah, I haven't exactly done a standalone episode on that. I've mentioned in
No.
some of my other true crime
As
episodes.
we say
And
in Ireland, only in America.
oh, perhaps, yes, because
Yeah.
of the way our country is laid out. And I just want to remind everybody that I'm talking to Ciaran Mylene, who's sharing a bunch of things about the Irish vanishing triangle. And if there are any other true crime cases that you would like mentioned on the show, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. You can also hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And feel free to visit some links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But Ciaran, I'd like to go back to you because are you ready now to share the next story in the timeline for us?
Yeah, no, I hope it's not like too complex or like too all over the place, because it is, as I said, it's a very complex series. So the next one in the case will be in 1998. Will be Deirdre Jacob, which would be a very well known case in Ireland as well. She was a college student. She was studying in London. She came back to Ireland for the summer to live with her parents' house in County Kildare, a big town called Newbridge. It would be about 30 kilometers south of Dublin. And so one morning she got up and walked into the town, about a 30-minute walk, but I think she stopped off to visit her grandmother in her grandmother's sweet shop. Then she went into the town, went to the post office, to the bank, bumped into his school friend, then decided to leave town, walked along kind of long country road. She seen a neighbor, he was fixing his roof or something. She said hello to him. Then she seen another neighbor, and he seen her literally standing across the road from her parents' bungalow, and that was the last sighting of her. And it'd be country, but it'd be the main road into the town, so there'd be a lot of traffic going by and all this type of stuff. But again, just vanished into thin air, like shockingly, like.
Yes, and this is one of the cases that maybe I had a little bit more familiarity with than the other ones, and that's how I learned about Larry Murphy. And one thing that stood out to me with this one compared to some of the other things that we've talked about is there is media of Deirdre Jacob, right? Like she is seen on surveillance cameras, and they know some things about
1998,
her.
yeah.
But this is one thing that I do recall from YouTube, and that is this the story where she went missing on like 200 meters from her home? Is that
Yeah,
the one where
that's it.
like she should have been able to get home, but sometime in between that last sighting at 200 meters and her house, she was abducted? Now, I have a
You
lot
will
of
have.
questions for you about that, but I'd like to know, do you have anything else you'd like to share first before I start asking away?
No, see, like as you said, it's so bizarre that she was just standing there, literally across the road from her home, and then gone, and there'd be cars going by the whole time. Like, so it's a very baffling case. So no, I'd be happy to hear the questions.
From looking at other things, particularly from the Lord and Arts channel, which has a show called Brain Scratch Searchlight that explores missing persons cases, a lot of people formulate theories in stories like this that she should have been abducted by somebody that she knew. That's why she's going like to her home, no commotion, no one is like hearing any screams. And as you
Mm.
said, passing cars don't see anything weird. And when someone is abducted so close to their home and there isn't really any sign of a struggle or any sign of anything out of the ordinary, they tend to formulate these theories that it could be someone that's in her inner circle. What do you think about that?
Well, see, like everybody, like unless you've been abducted or seen somebody being abducted, you can't really tell how it's going to happen. So all people kind of base abductions on is you see it on TV, okay, a crime show, and it's some man trying to drag a woman's handbag or her coat and trying to drag her into a car, okay. And so in real life, any cases that I've studied where a woman's been abducted and the guy was like, you know, experienced, as disturbing as that may be at it, right? He'll walk straight up to the woman, punch her straight in the face and drag her into the car. And that will take 5 seconds. Yeah, and like, that's such a quick amount of time. Like people aren't necessarily going to see that. And the woman is going to be stunned. She's not going to know what hit her and she'll be in the car in no time and the person will drive off. So when you think abduction, oh, she must have been struggling on the street for at least a minute and getting dragged into the car and all this, but that's not necessarily how it will go. It could be just bang, and she's in the car and that's it. She's gone. You know?
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. It
Yeah.
could have taken place like that. But is there any evidence that suggests what happened to Deirdre? Because as I understand, this is one where the case was upgraded from missing persons to homicide, correct?
Yeah, it has been, yeah. And that was the one, this was the one now, the guards, after the JoJo Dullard case, the guards were quite ready, like, for something like this to happen again. So I think her parents contacted the guards that evening, like at 7 o'clock or something, and straight away they were out, helicopters, roadblocks, like full on search, and couldn't find a trace of her, which kind of leads me to another story, because the guards have actually tried to they've brought a file against Larry Murphy to the Department of Prosecution in Ireland, but it got sent away. And one of the reasons they went to the file was when Larry Murphy was in prison. He was now this is a story from an inmate, but he went to the guards about it anyway and was not looking for early release or anything like this. So he was taking ecstasy with Larry Murphy one night in a cell and they were drinking. I know, prison life. And so Larry Murphy basically told him a very disturbing story that he was driving through Newbridge because he was working there at the time, and that actually has been proven. He was working in the town around the time Deirdre Jacob went missing. That has been proven. So he said that he was just driving along the road. He had his kids' toys all out in the car and stuff, you know, and he pulled in, seen her, showed her a map, and as soon as she leaned her head in the window, he punched her straight in the face, dragged her into the car. I know this is a terrible story. Dragged her into the car, and then but he said to the prison guy that she actually struggled so much that he had to kill her in the car, and then he hit her body straight away. So now that's two guys drunk in a cell talking or whatever, but the way he told the story, and then I always think back that the guards were out straight away searching and couldn't find anything. His story kind of tied up with that, like, but that was from the prison guy, yeah. And then they did look through like extensively through CCTV, and they seen someone that looked a lot like Larry Murphy in the post office, not at the exact same time as Deirdre Jacob, but on the same day. I think that video should be on YouTube, so you can see that and make what you want of it. Yeah. So and then yeah, so the guards, they sent a file to the Department of Public Prosecution, but no, it got sent back. Yeah.
Yes, and that's one thing that I remember from Danielle Howland's channel, where when she made the video 4 years ago, whenever it was, she was saying that they were close to making an arrest in the Deirdre Jacob case, or they were zoning in on a suspect, and I think that's what you were referring to, but then they were not able to do so. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it's so the way it works is the guards gather all the evidence and then they give the file to the state prosecutor, and they look through the file. Now they sat on it for about 3 years and then sent it back, but no, for whatever reason they didn't want to proceed. I suppose from their point of view is they don't want him to get a mistrial and can't be tried again. So that's the way they're looking at it, you know. And supposedly now the guards did go to Larry Murphy's house in London and put it to him, and Larry Murphy just asked, "Do you have a body?" And they said no, and he said literally, "Well then, fuck off." Yeah. So
Is
he's
that
quite,
right? It's just like that, huh?
yeah. That's the arrogance, but you know yourself, in these cases they are arrogant.
And because I mentioned Danielle Howland, she is a famous true crime
Yeah.
YouTuber. There's also a video that's been put out by Georgia Marie talking about the Irish vanishing triangle. And for you, someone who is a criminologist, do you think that true crime channels like that are helpful or are they harmful? Do they spread misinformation or do they provide strong analysis? And I'm always curious what people think about this.
No, well, I think in fairness, if you've done your research and you're not like giving your own like outrageous theories based on nothing, I think it's good to report on these things as long as you have it. But I think in these cases, like you have to be aware that there's like families and people who've been through unimaginable pain. So like you getting a little fact wrong mightn't seem too bad, but to the family it might seem terrible, like, you know, or you could steer the investigation in a different way or anything like this, you know, and then like say, let's say you decide to make a media video or that goes really big. So you have to be fully aware of that. You have to be completely factually like, so anything that I've ever written around, I've like triple, quadruple referenced it like through books, you know, the whole lot. Like, because so I think if you're making sure you're factual, then go for it. I'd say because it just gets the cases. You never know who's going to watch it or something might trigger something in someone's head to decide after all these years, actually, maybe I should go to the police and tell them what I know. That can help, like, you know, you just don't know. So, and if
Absolutely
people
not.
don't do these things, on the history, you know, the cases as well, that's another thing.
Even when my channel had 25 subscribers, I remember the first time that I was contacted by not a family member, but a friend of a family member who, a friend of the person who went missing, and then they just said they didn't like my episode. And I was just shocked that they would even find a small channel with 25 subscribers. But this material does get out there. And that was
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I had to learn that I really had to be more careful, not only with what I said, but also, as you said, about fact checking. And mostly, I don't talk about too many missing persons cases because these are very different. And this story with the Irish vanishing triangle involves a lot of murder stories, as we've shared. But with missing persons cases, most of the time, the victim hasn't done anything wrong. And it's not even like looking at like how somebody was murdered and following the series of events leading up to the murder. It's just a pure case of innocence. Somebody might have gone
Yeah.
out walking and they never came back. So there's almost a different level of sensitivity that I use when I'm
Yeah,
approaching
because the
missing
family,
person
you're
cases.
right. Yeah, because not to be, you know, not in a condescending manner or cold manner, I don't mean this, but the families of missing persons people, they don't have any answers, you know. Their mindset is kind of as it was on the first day the person went missing. Whereas, like, you know, I suppose if someone's murdered, the family can at least know where the person is and have some sort of closure. Like, I'm sure if your child went missing and even after 30 years and they've been declared murdered and all these things, you're still got to think maybe they could walk back through the door. Who knows? There's nobody knows anything, you know. So this is all. It's really painful for the families.
And with the other cases, you have more facts that you can work with. Like even what we've said about the first two crimes that, okay, the victim was abducted, they were strangled in some manner or fashion. This is how their remains were disposed. And you can compare that to other true crime cases, look at how the criminals might be thinking, and you try your best. But I mean, psychological profilers also do this, and they openly say by their own admission, their work does a lot of educated guessing. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there are certain facts that you can work with. Whereas when I would used to make up theories about true crime, sorry, about missing persons cases, speculating is very, very impractical because
Yeah.
it's not only educated guess, it's uneducated guessing. We don't even know if the person was truly even murdered or what happened to them, and
No.
so to speak. So that's why I've really
Exactly.
taken a step back from a lot of them.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then also they're unsolved as well, so you don't want to really kind of, you know, do that in there. But I think like I would always kind of have a rule, like I wouldn't like to talk about like cases that are like recent, like, you know, 5, 10 years ago, because they're still being investigated, you know, whereas these cases are cold cases. So it's actually probably a good thing to discuss them because they'll just disappear if you don't.
Right, that brings it back into the discussion.
Mm.
But right now, I would like to ask, are there any other cases on the timeline that you would like to share? Because you said that the timeline could go up all the way to 2011. And
Yeah,
is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
yeah. The last case I would always mention would be a woman called Claire Boylan. She was 36 years of age. She lives in Terranure. Now that would be right beside Rackar, where Eva Brennan lived. She left her parents' house one Sunday morning, said she was going to a large town in the Midlands called Tullamore, about 100 kilometres west of Dublin, to see a friend. But she never arranged this with the friend or anything, and basically went out the door, never to be seen again. There's not a trace of her. Like, there was no evidence of her going to Tullamore, no CCTV or anything. There's a few sightings after she was reported missing, walking around where she lived, but that's what she liked to do. She liked to go for walks, so that could be mistaken dates or times or whatever. But like the Eva Brennan case, absolutely nothing. Like, and it's just like a lot of people when they're talking about the Vanishing Triangle will kind of stop at 1998 or 2000 because that's when Larry Murphy was arrested and put into prison. But this is a woman that vanished in South Dublin. She lived basically right beside Eva Brennan, 36 years of age, never to be seen again. And again, like the Eva Brennan case, there's very little kind of known on it in the public. Just like nothing really. She just went out left her parents' house that Sunday and never to be seen again.
Okay, then, if we're going to get to that point, then I would like to turn it over to you and just ask, what is your theory or hypothesis as to what has happened with these crimes? And if you just don't have one, you can say that. Now, it sounds like you're heavily leaning toward Larry Murphy for some of these crimes, but overall, what do you think happened with all of these cases? What is your personal take on the subject?
Well, you can go obviously because I've studied them for so long. I've went into in my mind speculated like crazy and came up with all these other little links but I always when I'm writing anything about them around it just becomes a case of the more you know, somewhat the less you know with this. You would think like as you research further and further. That's why I actually admire you for bringing me on because it's so complicated and can seem so all over the place that it's a difficult kind of topic to branch fully and get in depth on because it's so complicated. So to decipher a theory, it's very hard. But when it comes, just a few little things that would kind of jump out at me, say when I was researching, would be Dublin City is split by a river, so there's a north side, south side, and half the city would live on one side, half the other, equal populations or whatever. And South Dublin, like Antoinette Smith lived there, Patricia Doherty lived in South Dublin, Annie McCarrick, Eva Brennan, and Claire Boylan. So out of the 7 cases we discussed, there's 5 women that lived in South Dublin. That was something that I was like, this is strange that South Dublin keeps coming up to me, popping out. But that's all. This was a little geographical link. And then you could say, look at Deirdre Jacob and JoJo Dullard. They were quite young, 18 and 21, and they were the ones that were outside Dublin. But, what does that mean? That there's 2 people operating, or, you just keep going down. You can keep speculating. And
To
one
ask you
thing,
a very direct question, do you believe that the first 2 crimes, Antoinette and Patricia, were killed by the same person, both of the victims that were strangled?
um, I would, just an opinion, I would think so, yeah, just because of the proximity to their bodies. They're kind of similar in age, similar in appearance, but again, these are the circumstantial things based on opinion. But it seems, that's the evidence. Like they were abducted, went missing from Dublin. They were found kind of not too far from each other, looked the same age. They both had short hair. So that's the victimology, yeah.
All right, and Ciaran, I'm going to give you the floor again. Do you have any final notes for the listeners of Black Box Online Radio? How can people find your material? Is there anything that you would like to promote?
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Just well, I suppose if you just search Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, my blog should come up, irelandsvanishingtriangle.com, and then there's some other media stuff in it. And also, I suppose if you read through that, there's a few timelines and maps and stuff. It might give people a clearer picture on the cases, because as I said, it's very complicated. So yeah, that would be the best source if anybody's looking to research the cases further or look into them. So I'm happy for anybody to contact me or anything. I'll always get back to them. I'm happy to discuss stuff with them if they like.
And your Facebook page is Irish Cold Cases, right?
Yeah, that's my Facebook, and like my Instagram is under the same name as well. They're all linked on my blog. If you go into vanishingtriangle.com, they'll be all there. Yeah.
Ciaran Mylene, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thanks, Ned, very much for bringing me on and for actually like going after the subject, because it's very complicated. So I hope we did a good job explaining it.
I think you did pretty well.
Great, thanks very much, Ned.
You're welcome.